Okay, so I'm trying to make like a vlog about the differences between the book Fire and Blood and the show House of the Dragon. Most people know that Fire and Blood was told from a history standpoint rather than by the people who were there when the events happened. So it was mostly a maester, and then there was like information, usually the more reckless of the accounts, from a court jester named Mushroom. Um, but I found a passage here on page 355 in Fire and Blood. It says, "And here we must digress to say a word about our sources. For much of what happened in the years that followed happened behind closed doors in the privacy of stairwells, council rooms, and bedchambers, and the full truth of it will likely never be known." We have, of course, the chronicles laid down by Grand Maester Runciter, Runciter. I don't know if they've mentioned him in the show at all, so I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Grand Maester Runciter and his successors. And many a court document as well, all the royal decrees and proclamations, but these tell only a small part of the story. For the rest, we must look to accounts written decades later by the children and grandchildren of those caught up in the events of the times, lords and knights reporting events witnessed by their forebears, third-hand recollections of aged serving men relating the scandals of their youth. Whilst these are undoubtedly of use, so much time passed between the event and the recording that many confusions and contradictions have inevitably crept in. Nor do these remembrances always agree. Unfortunately, this is also true of the two accounts by first-hand observers that influenced this book within a book. Sept and Eustace says, who served in the royal sept in the Red Keep during much of this time. He set down the most detailed history of this period as a confidant and confessor to King Viserys and his queens. He was well placed to know what was going on. He wasn't reticent about recording even the most shocking and salacious rumors and accusations. There's a lot of books that these characters wrote about the books that this book is about. To balance Eustace, okay, so it's saying that this is written by Grand Maester Runciter with the information from Sept and Eustace. And then it says, to balance Eustace, we have the testimony of Mushroom, based upon the verbal account of the court fool, set down by a scribe who failed to append his name. So we don't know who wrote down Mushroom's account. Who at various times capered for the amusement of King Viserys, Princess Rhaenyra. I'm not going to say who else because that's a spoiler. There's some personal information about him. Mushroom was thought feeble-minded, so kings and lords and princes did not scruple to hide their secrets from him. How much of this can be believed is in question. Later on, it was decreed that every copy of his book that Mushroom's testimony should be burned. But a few escaped the fires, it says. Okay. So, Sept and Eustace and Mushroom obviously don't always agree. It says, yet their tales do explain much and more of what might otherwise seem puzzling, and later accounts confirm enough of their stories to suggest that they contain at least some portion of truth. The question of what to believe and what to doubt remains for each student to decide. So basically for us as readers to decide what we think happened. And that's why the show is kind of brilliant, because it's set up to have possibilities instead of specific events that are written from the perspective of the characters. I don't know which I like more, because it's kind of up in the air here, but this is a picture of what's supposed to be Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Mushroom. Obviously, Viserys looking very different than he does in the show. Obviously, it's kind of a ridiculous photo of a little girl, but that's what Mushroom is supposed to look like, and that's his humor. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of basically it. So that's what the book says about the recounting of the events that are now taking place in House of the Dragon. Hey everyone, it's a different day, obviously. I'm in a different time of day, different outfit, different makeup. But after I made the narrators video, I kept finding more information about people who were contributing to the story. I think the book is just going to be infinitely more complicated than the show as far as who's telling the story. One, for obvious reasons, but two, because I can't quick read this 700-page book and sum it up. I'm trying to do a House of the Dragon Fire and Blood comparison, but I want to provide as accurate information as possible. So the first thing was that when I was researching and continuing on, I kept hearing Grand Maester Munkin mentioned, and he just kept coming up. Grand Maester Munkin. He was the maester that we haven't met in the show yet, but he ended up being a source of information on what was going on with the Green Council and the Greens in general. Grand Maester Munkin has a book that this book tells us about called The True Telling. Page 393, the council convened in the Queen's apartments after Viserys died, and it says, many accounts have come down to us about what is said. By far the most detailed and authoritative of them is Grand Maester Munkin's The Dance of Dragons, A True Telling. So, Maester Munkin, he might be in the show right now. There's a Maester Orwyle there, but some shenanigans happen with him. So he may appear in the show, but for Fire and Blood, he's the source of information, the primary source of information from the Green Council and that point of view. Orwyle's account was biased in favor of Rhaenyra, however, just as Septon Eustace's history of the dance was biased in favor of Aegon II. Maester Munkin, though Munkin's exhaustive history was not written until a generation later, and drew on many different sorts of materials, including Maester's chronicles, memoirs, steward's records, and interviews with 147 surviving witnesses to the great events of these times, his account of the inner workings of the court relies upon the confessions of Grand Maester Orwyle. And I'm going to skip the next sentence because it's a big spoiler. It's on 393. You can read it if you want. Page 393. So, it's another example of a maester writing a history from another source. There's going to be a lot of those. I can't go through 700 pages and just pull out all of the names. For one, it'll be like a 2-hour-long video. And also, it's not relevant to what's going on with the show, necessarily, because none of those people are in the show, except who we mentioned already. However, since I am doing a comparison, I want it to be as accurate as possible for, the book side of things. After I discovered a lot more about Grand Maester Munkin, so I kept coming upon his name, even just reading about what happens with Lucerys and everything, so I wanted to include him in this video. The other thing is that if you go to the title page, Fire and Blood, being a history of the Targaryen kings of Westeros, Volume 1, from Aegon I, the Conqueror, to, gonna skip that, by Archmaester Gildane of the Citadel of Oldtown, as transcribed by George R.R. Martin. I think George R.R. Martin's bit here is similar to something that the author of The Princess Bride wrote that book in the disguise of being another person who was aware that he was writing the book. There was like these multiple layers of of authorship, and it was really clever, and I wonder if that's what George had in mind. So yeah, so there's a bunch of people responsible for writing this, depending on which layer of the onion you're in. We're going from year, I think it was like 27 BC, like before Aegon's conquest, to year 157-ish. So there's probably almost 200 years of history in this 700-page book, and there's still a whole bunch more to go. This I'm not talking about the Dance of Dragons being 200 years before Game of Thrones. That's different. This goes back to before Aegon's conquest, and then forward about 200 years in the Targaryen history. So yeah. So the takeaway from this is, I believe he doesn't want you to know who was correct, because there's multiple interpretations, which is brilliant. So just wanted to add that in there. I haven't forgotten that there are other possible sources of information or narrators, but I'm just going to let these go as is right now, and then as the show progresses, or if I just feel like it, I'll progress through the story and explain more of that as we go. So thank you for allowing me that liberty. Thanks for watching. Making sure my eyelash didn't fall off. 336, 393. Except my face is really red. Forgot to mention a few bits, or eyelashes are so fun. He was the source of a lot of our why can't I talk? I need to feed my dragon. Wait, but then how was he even there? I would love to pick his brain about that. George, give us a call. Anyway,